She never thought loneliness could sound like silence. When Daniel left that morning for his overseas assignment, Emily thought she could handle it. They had been married for 6 years. Enough time to learn how to live with distance. At least that's what she told herself. But when the door shut behind him, the house didn't just go quiet. It went hollow. The walls echoed. Even the soft hum of the refrigerator felt louder than her own breathing. Her golden retriever, Max, followed her everywhere. From the kitchen to the living room, his tail wagged uncertainly as if asking, "What now?" Emily bent down, running her fingers through his fur. "It's just you and me, buddy," she whispered. For a moment it comforted her. But when night fell, the comfort turned to ache. Every evening Emily sat by the window, watching the empty driveway. Daniel's car wasn't there, but his absence was heavy, heavier than she expected. She tried calling, but the time difference made everything harder. When he answered, he was always rushing between meetings, polite but distracted. "Love you, Em. I'll call you tomorrow." Tomorrow became next week. Then next month, she started talking to Max more, about grocery lists, the weather, even her feelings. The dog would tilt his head and listen like he understood every word. Sometimes Emily would laugh softly. "You're a better listener than most people, you know?" Still, the silence stayed. Not angry, not cruel, just endless. One Saturday evening, Emily took Max for a walk to clear her head. The sun was setting, painting the sky with gold and pink. She stopped by the small park at the end of their street, a quiet place where kids used to play before dinner. Max sniffed the grass happily, tugging the leash forward. That's when she heard a man's voice behind her. "Beautiful dog you've got there." Emily turned. A man stood a few steps away, holding a leash too. His dog, a black lab, sat calmly beside him. The man looked to be in his mid-30s, dressed casually, friendly eyes that made her feel oddly safe. "Thanks," she replied, smiling politely. He nodded. "Name's Ryan. Just moved into the blue house across the street. Been seeing you walk him every evening?" "Oh," she said, surprised. "I'm Emily, and this is Max." The dogs sniffed each other and instantly became friends. Ryan chuckled. "Looks like they get along faster than people do." They talked a little, about dogs, weather, the neighborhood. Nothing deep, but it felt easy, too easy. When she checked the time, an hour had passed. She said goodbye quickly, her heart beating faster than it should. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She wasn't thinking about Ryan exactly. She was thinking about how alive that one conversation made her feel. How long had it been since someone looked at her and actually saw her? The next day, while making coffee, she noticed something strange. There was a folded piece of paper slipped under her front door. Her stomach tightened. She opened it. It was a short note. "Nice talking yesterday. I'll be at the cafe across the street at 3. Bring Max if you want." "Ryan," Emily froze. She looked at the note again, unsure how to feel. It wasn't flirtatious, not even suggestive. Just friendly. Still, something about it made her pulse quicken. She tried to ignore it. She cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, turned on the TV. But everything felt louder than usual. Her thoughts wouldn't stop circling back to that cafe, that time. 3 p.m. She glanced at the clock. 2:45, Max sat by the door, tail thumping as if waiting for her decision. "Don't look at me like that," she muttered, slipping on her jacket. "It's just coffee." The cafe was small and cozy, the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans. Ryan was already there, sitting by the window with 2 coffees and his dog curled up at his feet. He stood when he saw her. "You came just for the caffeine," she teased, but her voice was softer than usual. They talked for hours. About books, movies, life. Ryan didn't pry, didn't flirt. He just listened. And that simple act, being listened to, made something inside her stir. When she left, she realized she had smiled more that afternoon than she had in months. That night, Daniel called. His voice crackled over the line. "Hey, how's everything?" "Sorry, been crazy here." Emily swallowed hard. "It's fine. Just quiet." He laughed tiredly. "You and Max keeping the house together?" "Yeah," she said, forcing a smile he couldn't see. "We're doing okay." But after the call ended, she sat on the couch with Max's head in her lap and whispered, "Are we really?" The following week, Emily found herself looking forward to her evening walks. Sometimes she'd see Ryan walking his dog too, and they'd wave, pretending it was coincidence. But she knew, and he knew, it wasn't. Their conversation stayed innocent, but the silence in between began to feel charged, fragile, like standing near a line neither wanted to cross. One night, while scrolling through old photos of Daniel, Emily realized she couldn't remember the last time they'd laughed together. Not small talk, real laughter, real warmth. She wondered when love had turned into habit. The next evening, while walking Max near the park again, she saw Ryan sitting alone on a bench. He waved her over. She hesitated, then walked closer. Max wagged his tail and jumped beside Ryan's dog. Happy reunion as always. Ryan smiled gently. "Long day?" She nodded, just quiet again. "Sometimes quiet hurts more than noise," he said, his tone almost a whisper. Emily looked at him, feeling her chest tighten. She didn't answer. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them slowed. The fading sunset, the rustle of leaves, the heartbeat she suddenly heard in her own ears. When she finally stood to leave, Ryan's gaze lingered for a second too long. Not longing, not desire, just understanding. That night, Emily lay awake again. Max curled at her feet, breathing softly. She stared at the ceiling and whispered to herself, "What am I doing?" She told herself it was nothing. Just friendship, just loneliness filling silence. But deep down, she knew she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't name, and maybe couldn't control. As she turned off the bedside lamp, she noticed something at the edge of the doormat again. A shadow, a faint sound. She sat up, her heart quickening. She got out of bed, walked quietly to the front door and looked down. A small note. Folded neatly. This time it didn't say much. Just 2 words. "See you?" Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She didn't know what scared her more. The thought of saying yes. Or the thought of wanting to. Emily stood there under the pale hallway light, holding the note, while Max stared at her with wide, patient eyes, as if even he was waiting for her answer. What happens when comfort starts to feel more dangerous than desire? Emily stared at the note for hours. "See you?" Just 2 words, yet they pulled at something inside her that she couldn't explain. She told herself not to go, that it was foolish. But by the time the afternoon sun hit the living room, she had already clipped Max's leash and grabbed her coat. Ryan was waiting at the cafe. Same table by the window, same easy smile. "You came," he said softly, the same way he had the first time. She smiled back, but inside, her thoughts were a storm. They talked again, about work, family, books, movies. He didn't pry into her marriage, didn't ask questions he shouldn't. He just listened. And the more he listened, the more she wanted to speak. For the first time in months, Emily felt seen. Not as a wife, not as someone waiting for a call, but as herself. Max sat under the table, tail flicking lightly, as if blessing the quiet between them. Every now and then, Ryan would lean in and say something funny, and Emily would laugh. A real laugh. The kind she had forgotten she could still have. When she left that day, she told herself it was harmless. Just 2 lonely people sharing coffee. Nothing more. But when she got home, she caught herself checking the window, waiting for Ryan to walk his dog again. Days passed, and slowly their meetings became routine. Sometimes it was the park, sometimes the cafe, sometimes just a wave across the street. Ryan never crossed a line, but the air between them carried something unspoken. That quiet, unnameable pull that made her heart race even when nothing was said. One evening, it began to rain. Emily was standing on her porch, trying to bring Max inside when she saw Ryan across the street, struggling with an umbrella. She laughed and called out, "You're going to get soaked." He looked up, smiled, and jogged over. "Just returning Max's leash," he said, holding it out. He dropped it yesterday. She didn't even remember. Rain poured down harder. Ryan stood under the edge of the roof, water dripping from his hair. They were close now. close enough for her to notice the faint scent of coffee and rain on his shirt. For a second, neither spoke. Just the sound of rain, thunder rolling somewhere in the distance, Max barking faintly behind them. The world outside blurred, and it felt like time had stopped. Then Max barked again, louder this time, breaking the spell. Ryan blinked, stepped back slightly. "You should go rest," he said quietly. "You'll catch a cold." Emily nodded, but her pulse was still racing as she closed the door. She leaned her head against it, exhaling slowly, realizing what almost happened, and what didn't. That night, she sat by the window again, staring at the rain sliding down the glass. Guilt crept in, quiet and sharp. She hadn't done anything wrong, not really. But she couldn't deny it. She had wanted something. Not romance, not passion, just connection. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached over, expecting one of Daniel's usual short messages. But this time it wasn't short. "Hey, there's been a delay with the project. They might need me to stay another month. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you, I promise." She read it twice, feeling her stomach sink. Another month. Another 30 days of empty rooms, cold coffee, and one-sided conversations. She typed back, "It's okay. Just stay safe." But even as she wrote the words, she felt the lie. Later that evening, she took Max out again. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets smelling fresh and quiet. She wasn't surprised to see Ryan waiting by the park. He didn't say much at first, and neither did she. They just walked, slow, silent, step by step. Finally, Ryan said, "You don't have to explain anything. I get it, it's hard being alone." Emily looked away. "I'm not alone. I have Max." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, but sometimes even a house full of noise can still feel empty." The words hit her harder than she expected. Because he was right. Daniel's calls had become shorter, colder, like they were talking from two different worlds. And here, next to Ryan, everything felt simple, easy. Too easy. A part of her wanted to stop seeing him, to end this before it became something she couldn't control. But the other part, the quieter, lonelier part, couldn't walk away. In the following days, they continued to meet. Always outside, always public, always innocent. But the energy between them kept shifting. Sometimes, when their hands brushed while passing a leash, Emily would feel a spark and instantly look away. Ryan never mentioned it, but his eyes said everything she didn't dare admit. One afternoon, while walking Max through the park, they sat by the lake. The setting sun painted the water gold. Ryan threw a stick into the water for his dog, then said softly, "You ever think about what makes people stay faithful?" Emily froze. "Why are you asking me that?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because sometimes loyalty feels like silence, and silence can hurt too." She didn't answer. The question stayed in her mind long after she got home. That night, she stood in front of the mirror, studying her own reflection. She didn't look different, yet something inside her had shifted. She didn't recognize this version of herself, the one waiting for someone who wasn't her husband. She went to bed restless, tossing and turning. Max climbed beside her, curling into a warm ball. She whispered, "We're fine, right?" But even she didn't believe it. The next morning, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. She opened it with trembling hands. "Hey, Em, bad news. The flight's delayed again. Storm over the Atlantic. I'll update you when I can." Her heart sank. Another delay. Another week alone. She looked out the window and saw Ryan across the street, sitting on his porch, coffee mug in hand, his dog at his feet. Their eyes met for a second. Just 1 second. Then he smiled, a small, quiet smile that said, "I'm here if you need me." Emily looked away quickly, but the warmth stayed in her chest. That evening, she went for another walk. Ryan joined her without asking. They didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was low. "You deserve to be happy, you know." She stopped walking, looking at him with uncertainty. "And what if happiness is complicated? Then maybe it's still worth finding," he said. For a moment, they stood there, two souls caught between right and almost. Emily wanted to step back, but her feet wouldn't move. She could hear her heartbeat, the soft wind, Max's gentle breathing beside her. Then Ryan smiled faintly and said, "Good night, Emily." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing under the dim streetlight, heart heavy and confused. She returned home, locking the door behind her. The silence wrapped around her again, familiar, but unbearable now. She picked up her phone, scrolling through Daniel's old messages, the words that once made her feel safe now sounding like distant echoes. And just when she placed the phone down, it buzzed again, not from Daniel this time, a message from Ryan. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." Emily's breath caught. She didn't reply, but she didn't delete it either. As she turned off the light and lay beside Max, she whispered, "What if needing someone isn't the same as loving them?" And for the first time, she didn't know the answer. Sometimes, the worst temptation begins with a kind heart. When Daniel's message arrived, "Another month, Em, just one more. I promise." Emily felt something break quietly inside her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, staring at the phone until Max's soft bark pulled her back to reality. The house around her felt even emptier now, as if it too had given up waiting. That evening, Emily took Max for a walk, hoping the cold air would calm her thoughts. The sky was dull gray, wind brushing through the trees, and her heart felt heavy. Halfway through the park, she saw Ryan sitting alone on a bench. He looked different. His usual easy smile was gone. His shoulders slouched, hands clasped tightly like he was carrying something he couldn't drop. "Rough day?" she asked, sitting beside him. He exhaled. "My ex-wife got remarried. I found out today." Emily hesitated. "I'm sorry," he smiled faintly. "Don't be. I knew it would happen. Still, it feels strange, like watching your old life move on without you." For a moment, they just sat there in silence. Max laid his head on Ryan's knee, and Ryan's dog pressed against Emily's leg, as if both animals understood the quiet ache between their humans. "I can't imagine how that feels," she said softly. Ryan looked at her, his eyes tired but gentle. "You ever feel like you gave so much to someone that you forgot how to be yourself?" Her throat tightened. Every day. The wind grew colder, but neither of them moved. For the first time, Emily didn't feel lonely. She felt understood, without needing to explain anything. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't about attraction. It was something deeper. Two people standing on the same fragile ground of loss and confusion. They stayed like that until the sky turned orange. When Ryan finally spoke again, his voice was low, almost like a confession. "I'm not asking for anything from you, Emily. I just don't want to feel invisible anymore." The words hit her harder than she expected, because she understood them completely. She didn't answer. Instead, she rested her hand on Max's head and whispered, "You're not invisible." When she got home that night, she looked at her wedding photo, the one on the mantel. Daniel's hand was around her shoulder, both smiling wide, full of hope. But now, the picture looked like strangers pretending to be happy. She traced the edge of the frame and felt tears she hadn't realized were coming. The next morning, she told herself she wouldn't see Ryan again. It was getting too close, too complicated. She tried to stay busy, cleaning, baking, reading, anything to fill the silence. But when she walked past the window and saw him sitting on his porch, holding a cup of coffee, her heart tugged. He looked up and waved lightly. She didn't wave back, but that small gesture stayed with her all day. By evening, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed Max's leash and stepped outside. Ryan was still there, as if waiting. "Hey," he said, standing. "Hey," she replied. Her voice sounded tired. They walked together again, quiet at first. The street was glowing with the orange tint of sunset. "You didn't wave earlier," he said softly, almost teasing. "I shouldn't have even looked," she replied honestly. He chuckled. "Fair enough." They walked a little longer before she spoke again. "You know, I used to think marriage meant safety, that no matter how hard life got, there was always someone who'd stay." Ryan nodded. "And now?" "Now," she said, voice trembling slightly. "I think marriage is about showing up. Not just being there, but being present. And Daniel? He's not here. Not really. Ryan didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes said he understood completely. They reached the park again, where the same bench waited for them. They sat down. Max curled beside her, and Ryan's dog rested between them like a quiet wall neither wanted to cross. For a long moment, there was peace. Fragile, fleeting, but real. Then Ryan turned slightly. You ever wonder why people meet at the wrong time? Emily looked at him. Maybe it's to remind us what we deserve, even if we can't have it. He smiled sadly. That's a beautiful way to look at heartbreak. She didn't respond. She couldn't. When she returned home, the phone rang. Daniel again, his voice cheerful, unaware. Hey, guess what? They extended the project another 2 weeks. Can you believe it? She swallowed hard. That's great, Daniel. He kept talking about work, deadlines, colleagues, but Emily barely heard. Her eyes drifted to the window, where she could see Ryan's porch light glowing faintly across the street. When the call ended, she whispered into the silence, You don't even hear me anymore. The next few days blurred together. Emily tried to keep her distance, but it was impossible. Every walk with Max, every trip outside, Ryan was there. Not intruding, not pushing, just existing near her, quietly patient. One afternoon, while she was watering her plants, Ryan called from across the yard. Need a hand? She smiled without thinking. You're going to ruin that shirt, he grinned. It's already ruined. They laughed, and for that one moment it felt normal, like friendship. But deep down, they both knew it wasn't just that anymore. Something was growing quietly between them. Something they both feared but couldn't stop. That evening, she brought him a piece of pie she'd baked. For helping, she said. He took it, eyes soft. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she admitted, and immediately regretted how it sounded. But he didn't react. He just smiled. Then thank you. They sat on his porch for a while, sharing pie, talking about nothing and everything. Music, favorite movies, even childhood memories. It was simple, warm, human. When she finally stood to leave, Ryan said quietly, You know, you don't have to feel guilty for needing someone. Emily froze. She didn't turn around. She just whispered, But I do. That night, she couldn't sleep again. Max lay beside her, breathing softly. She stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning. It wasn't about love, not yet, but it was about the loneliness she'd tried so hard to hide, and the way Ryan's presence made it disappear. She got up, walked to the window, and looked outside. The street was dark, calm, still. Ryan's porch light was still on. She almost opened the door. Almost. But then her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Daniel. Good news. I'm coming home tomorrow. Her heart stopped. Tomorrow. After months of silence, he was finally coming back. Relief and panic tangled inside her. She looked back out the window, at the porch light across the street, still glowing softly. Emily whispered, Tomorrow changes everything, as Max pressed his head against her leg. And outside, the light in Ryan's house flickered out, leaving the street in complete silence. Can love survive the space where silence once lived? Emily barely slept that night. Her mind replayed every word, every walk, every quiet glance she had shared with Ryan. And now, Daniel was coming home, the man she had promised her life to, the man she had once waited for with hope instead of emptiness. She lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, Max curled protectively beside her as if sensing her confusion. When the morning light spilled into the room, she stood up slowly. The house felt unfamiliar, like a place she'd borrowed and never truly owned. She cleaned everything, the kitchen counters, the floors, even the picture frames. Not because they were dirty, but because it gave her something to do, something that wasn't thinking. She wanted to feel ready for Daniel's return. But nothing about her felt ready. By afternoon, the sound of a car in the driveway made her heart skip. Max ran to the window, barking excitedly. Emily froze. Through the glass, she saw Daniel step out, carrying his bag, smiling that tired but familiar smile. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. When he opened the door, she forced herself to move. "Welcome home," she said softly. He dropped his bag and hugged her tightly. "I missed you," he murmured. Emily closed her eyes. His arms were warm, familiar, but something was different. The comfort was there, but the spark was gone. She whispered, "I missed you too," even though it didn't feel entirely true. Max wagged his tail and circled them happily, unaware of the storm that brewed silently above his head. Daniel laughed and crouched down to pet him. "At least someone's excited to see me," he joked. Emily smiled weakly. "He's been your biggest fan." The rest of the day passed in slow motion. Daniel talked endlessly about his trip, the meetings, the people, the challenges. Emily listened, nodding, smiling at the right times, but her thoughts kept drifting. Every time she looked at his face, she wondered if he could see the change in hers. That evening, while Daniel unpacked, Emily stood by the window again. Across the street, Ryan's house looked dark and quiet. She wondered if he knew Daniel was back. Part of her wanted to see him one last time, to say goodbye, to thank him for being there in her loneliness. But she knew she couldn't. Dinner was awkward. Daniel tried to make conversation, but Emily's replies were short. He noticed. "You're quiet tonight," he said gently. "I'm just tired," she replied quickly. He reached for her hand. "It's been a long few months. For both of us," she nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, it has." When they went to bed, Daniel fell asleep almost instantly, his breathing calm and steady. Emily lay beside him, staring into the darkness, her thoughts loud enough to drown out the quiet. Max lay at her feet, restless. She whispered to him, "What's wrong with me, Max?" The dog lifted his head, blinking softly, then laid it back down without a sound. At some point, she slipped out of bed, walked to the window again, and looked out into the night. The air was still, the street empty, but she imagined Ryan sitting on his porch like before, holding a cup of coffee, lost in thought. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Goodbye," though he couldn't hear it. The next morning, Daniel woke up early, cheerful, like everything was normal. "I was thinking we could go out tonight," he said while pouring coffee. "Just us, like old times," Emily hesitated. That sounds nice, but inside her heart twisted. She didn't want to pretend anymore. She wanted to feel something real again, even if it meant facing what she'd been avoiding. As the day went on, Daniel seemed oblivious to her distance. He talked about plans, upcoming projects, even joked about taking a trip together. Emily tried to respond, but her voice kept fading. She wasn't angry at him. She just couldn't reach the version of herself that once fit beside him so easily. That afternoon, while Daniel took Max for a walk, Emily sat alone on the porch. The air smelled of rain again, soft and heavy, just like the night Ryan had come over. The memory stung, not because she missed him, but because she missed who she was when she felt alive in his presence. When Daniel returned, wet from a sudden drizzle, he laughed. "Max dragged me halfway across the park." Emily smiled faintly. "He's missed having you around." Daniel looked at her carefully. "And what about you?" The question hit harder than she expected. She looked away. "I'm trying." That night after dinner, Daniel fell asleep on the couch watching TV. Emily sat beside him for a while, studying his face, the lines she'd memorized years ago, the eyes that had once made her feel safe. But safety wasn't enough anymore. She realized she had spent months waiting for him to come back, only to discover that she had changed while he was gone. She got up quietly, walked to the bedroom, and picked up her phone. Ryan's name was still there in her messages. No new texts, no words, just silence, the kind that now felt like closure. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen. Then slowly, she deleted his contact. Her hands trembled as she did it, but she felt something shift. Not relief, but peace. She walked to the window one last time. Rain had started again, gentle and rhythmic. Across the street, Ryan's house was dark. Max came to her side, pressing his head against her leg. she whispered. "We did nothing wrong, right?" The dog looked up, silent but loyal, his eyes calm as if forgiving everything she couldn't forgive herself for. In that moment, Emily realized love wasn't just about passion or loyalty. It was about choice, choosing to stay, choosing to rebuild, even when everything inside you wants to run. She turned off the light, sat on the couch beside Daniel, and let the sound of rain fill the room. The silence didn't hurt this time. It just existed. But as she glanced at her phone one last time before setting it down, a message popped up from an unknown number. "Take care of yourself, Emily. You deserve to be happy." Her heart stopped. She didn't need to ask who it was from. Emily stared at the glowing screen, the rain whispering against the glass, torn between the life she had and the one that might have been. As Max quietly laid his head on her lap, eyes closing, as if keeping her secret forever.